everyone. Sorry, I'm a poor filler for the country head, but I hope you can make do with me. I know you've been hearing a lot about plastics since the morning, even though the focus may have been on recycling in general. But it's not surprising that the conversation has focused, at least in the last session that I was here, I heard a lot about plastics, and it's not surprising because it is indeed one of the biggest environmental challenges that we face today. And again, I don't have to go over some of the statistics. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it, not just today, but in general, because plastics has been so much in the news. But I can't help sort of highlighting that, if there's one thing that is common, they say, between the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest point on the earth, and Mount Everest, which is the highest point, it is the presence of plastics. And this is plastic which is generated very sort of at a significant distance from these places, but it's made its way to these very remote locations. So that's the menace of plastics that we face today. And the impacts are severe, far-reaching, because plastics, as we know, don't sort of degrade very simply over time. They stay in the environment as microplastics, as nanoplastics for hundreds of years, and they have made their way into the food chain, in all sort of dimensions of our ecosystems, and have multiple impacts, some of the impacts which we don't even understand fully yet. They say that by 2050, there will be more plastic than fish by weight in the oceans. And it's also being said that we as human beings are consuming almost one, if I'm not mistaken, one credit card worth of microplastics a week. So those are the kinds of very alarming sort of statistics and numbers that are going around as far as the impact of plastics is concerned. But I think what we really need to focus on, and the previous speaker also spoke about what's happening globally on plastics, and I thought as UNEP, because we are hosting the discussions that are happening currently on an internationally binding agreement on plastics, and the whole process is happening through an intergovernmental negotiating committee which has now met a few times, and a zero draft of that treaty is ready, and Mr. Joshi spoke about some of the features of that draft, so I won't go into it. Let me just say that India has been a pioneer when it comes to the whole issue of plastics. It was in 2018 on the World Environment Day that India took the theme of plastics. It was called Beat Plastic Pollution. The next year, India actually piloted a resolution at the United Nations Environment Assembly on single-use plastics, a resolution that was unanimously adopted by all member states. And then at UNEP, the United Nations Environment Assembly 5th session, there was the adoption of a resolution on coming up with an internationally binding agreement on plastics. And we believe at UNEP that this is the most important international multilateral environmental agreement since Paris, since climate. So it's really, when it comes to the severity or the salience of this issue, it's at par with climate change, given the far-reaching consequences of plastics. I wanted to sort of focus a little bit on what's happening in India, apart from the issues that I've already highlighted, or the steps or the initiatives that I've already highlighted. I think it's worth noting that in terms of legislation, and I'm sure all of you are familiar, in terms of legislation, India has come up with a ban or a regulation on 19 single-use plastic products. And there are also very detailed guidelines now for extended producer responsibility on packaging plastic waste, which constitutes about 60% of India's total plastic consumption. The Central Pollution Control Board has set up a state-of-the-art web portal to track the activities on EPR and ensure that there is effective implementation of the guidelines. And the latest statistics that we have show that more than 35,000 producers, importers and brand owners, and some 2,000 plus plastic waste processors, including recyclers, have registered on the portal. More than 3.7 billion tons worth of EPR certificates have been generated and transferred to PIBOs, which is definitely a significant achievement. But as a part of what we are doing, and we're working in several states now, we're in Bihar, we're in Maharashtra, in Telangana, in Tamil Nadu, working with industry and with state governments to understand what are the challenges that both the local bodies as well as industry is facing when it comes to implementation of the EPR regulations. And there are several of these. I won't go into details because I'm sure all of you are better versed with these, with these challenges than I am. But I think what's really important is that this needs to be seen, the regulation and the whole policy framework that is currently in place on plastics needs to be really seen as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. For the small and medium scale industry, there is, we understand there's a lot of hesitation because it sort of brings them into the fold of regulation the moment you register yourself on that portal and you share information with regard to your waste generation or plastic production. It brings you into the fold of regulation and information sharing. But I think what's more important is that this is a growing industry because apart from all the environmental consequences of plastic, I think one of the big things is that there's also a lot of material wasted because this is material that is either burned or just sort of stays in the environment. It's not being recycled, it's not being brought into a circular economy. And I think that's the point as UNEP we are trying to push and make a case for, that whether it's an international agreement or whether it is a national policy framework, it really needs to provide sufficient incentives for multiple stakeholders to benefit from a new global plastic circular economy. And I think that's really critical when we are framing the regulations. This means that there is an enabling environment where it is in everyone's interest to actually implement the agreement. And if the agreement creates the right enabling environment for catalyzing a new economy, then we will have a process that works for the economy and also meets environmental and social objectives without any trade-offs. And just to give you a sense of the numbers, globally it is estimated that the plastic recycling market was valued at about 35 billion in 2020, projected to reach about 60 billion by 2028. So expected to double in just about 7 years. Growing about 7%. But in India, the growth rate is actually even higher. It's actually more than 11% between 23 and 28. So the recycling industry, particularly the plastics recycling industry, is poised for significant growth. And therefore, that's the point we're sort of making repeatedly, that apart from just a huge environmental challenge, we have to see this as a great opportunity. And we've been interacting a lot with startups who are coming up with alternatives to single-use plastics, and also recyclers who are seeing a lot of value in the kinds of products that can be made from recycled plastics. And of course, globally, more and more products are now being brought into the fold of what is permissible as recycled plastic. And the EPR regulation actually also is a progressive regulation because over time it sort of extends the mandate in terms of recycled products or recycled content in products. So let me only say, I know that this is the last session, let me only say that, if we are really to make a headway on this huge global challenge that we all are facing, and we in UNEP often talk about the triple planetary crisis of climate change, of nature and of pollution, these three crises that we are facing today, and plastics is something that transcends all of these three crises. It's a pollution issue, but it's also a biodiversity issue. You've all seen images of marine sort of species ingesting plastic or getting trapped in plastic. It's also a climate issue because plastic production, of course, is based on fossil fuels, so it contributes to CO2 emissions. But it is the whole sort of process of plastic production is emitting, but also plastic is limiting the ability of our ecosystems to sequester, especially our marine and ocean ecosystems, to sequester carbon, and therefore it's also contributing to climate change like that. So plastics is really an issue, I think, which transcends the triple planetary crisis, and therefore it is something that we really need to be concerned about, because it is something which is just not something which is going to be, a challenge or an environmental issue that is not affecting us, but something that will affect us more and more in terms of health, in terms of what it does to the productive capacities of our ecosystems and hence our economies. And therefore it's important to take note. And businesses really must be at the front and center of this challenge. It is only with the support of industry and business, whether it's large or small, that we can move to a new circular economy in plastics, which is, which meets, which becomes a harbinger, so to speak, of prosperity, but also addresses the triple planetary crisis. So I will pause at that. I know I've not said anything new because I heard the previous speaker and I know that a lot of discussion has been happening on this issue. But let me only add here that we are working with several state governments now in UNEP to help them in the implementation of some of the regulations, especially on EPR. And we are also talking a lot to industry to understand what their challenges are. We're trying to play the interface between the government and the industry, between local bodies and industry. So if there is anything, any specific concerns that you as industry have, which you would like us to take to the government, or which you think need redressal in a more organized way, please do write to us, please do reach out. We are happy to support. And also, if any of you wish to be called in when we have the stakeholder consultations, we are very happy to also send you an invite. Because really, this is a problem that has to be addressed jointly. There is no silver bullet to addressing plastics, and unless all of us come together, we'll not be able to address this issue. And industry definitely is one of the main stakeholders in in handling this challenge. So. With those words and with that sort of, I wouldn't say promise, but that support that we as UNEP can offer in terms of addressing some of your challenges. Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure to get invited here. Thank you very much.